If you've been using a DSLR for years and now you're thinking about making the jump to a mirrorless camera, you might be wondering what you can expect. Well, stick around because I'm going to tell you. I just made the jump from DSLR to mirrorless. It's been 6 months, and here's what I've learned. Before we get started, don't forget to check out my podcast. It's called Photobomb, and it's available anywhere that podcasts are found. If you would like to go and have a beer with a couple of your funny photography friends about once a week, then you are going to love the Photobomb podcast, so be sure and check it out. Me and Gary Hughes, we've been doing it for 5 years now, and I guarantee you're going to like it. Also, join my group on Facebook. It's called Pro Photo Talk with Boo Ray Perry. Great community there. Be sure and comment and hit a like button and give me a subscribe as well, and, well, all the things that you have to do when you're supporting a YouTube channel. Also, everything I talk about is always listed on my education page on my website, and the link's going to be right down there in the description. If you go there and you see everything that I carry, both my pro gear and my travel gear and all my accessories, and if you click one of those links and you buy something, I might make a couple of dollars, and it helps me to keep this channel alive. All right. 6 months ago, I made the switch. I was a DSLR shooter. I shot Canon. And I made the switch not only from DSLR to mirrorless, but also from full frame to APS-C, to crop sensor. And I've made videos about that too. I might put a link up here, for you to one of those videos. I think you'll enjoy that. But what I want to talk about today is just specifically moving from DSLR to mirrorless. I'm not gonna talk about APS-C versus full frame because that's like a whole other video. Let's try and keep it to one thing at a time. So I sat down and I thought about all the things that I've noticed in the last 6 months. Some things that were completely expected and some things were completely unexpected as to changes that I've had to undergo in how I shoot and how I think about photography based on the fact that I am now using a mirrorless camera. All right, let's get started. Right off the bat, the most obvious difference is going to be weight and size. Mirrorless cameras, they're called mirrorless because they don't have a mirror. They don't have the mirror function and stuff in here. And so as a result, the body doesn't have to be as thick and the camera can be smaller. But I think what was surprising was that even though I think switching to mirrorless shaved an average of about 20% of the weight off of my camera and my rig when I'm carrying it, I really don't feel like I noticed that weight change a great deal. I notice it a little bit when I pick up my camera. I'm like, okay, it's not quite as heavy as my old camera, but it's not really something you're going to be like, wow, oh my gosh, this camera's so light now. Nah, that's really not going to happen. And as far as size is concerned, what I have found is the mirrorless cameras, the bodies are in fact smaller, but the lenses are really not. The lenses are not much smaller at all. This lens, which is a 24-70 equivalent, this is an 18-55 millimeter lens, which is the same as my 24-70 millimeter lens when I shot Canon full frame. This lens is really not that much smaller. I mean, it's a little smaller, but it's just not something you drastically notice it. And when you go up to, say, the 70-200, yeah, the lens is shorter, but you're still talking about a long lens. So instead of having a lens that's this long, it's this long. Right? So it's not a huge difference. So weight and size, people say, oh, I want to go to mirrorless because I want to get my weight down and my size down. It is smaller, and I do feel like it all fits in my case easier, but I don't know that alone would be like a reason for making the switch. I don't think it's a huge change. You're still going to end up carrying a lot of lenses and a lot of bodies and a lot of accessories, and it's still going to fill up your bag. You're going to fill up your bag no matter what. I mean, if the camera was this big, I would still find a way to fill up my bag. That's just the way you are with bags. So it is smaller, it is lighter, but it's not really game changing. Without a doubt, one of the biggest changes to your shooting style that you will experience as a result of switching to mirrorless is using the live view function on the back LCD. Up until now, my entire career, you're taking pictures, you're looking through the camera. And now, for the first time, I can just look at the back of my camera. And this is huge. I mean, this is really a difference in your style. It's like, I don't know, it's like going from a manual car to an automatic car. When you've only driven a stick your whole life, suddenly, where's the stick? This is what I'm used to. And now I don't have to actually hold the camera up to my eye. And this really makes a difference when you're doing things like headshots. So if I'm set on a tripod and I'm shooting a series of people, I don't ever have to look, I don't have to get down. Okay, I can come out from behind my camera and I can talk to people and interact with them more, get better expressions from them, make them more comfortable. And this really can be a game changer, especially if you're a person who is doing portrait work and you're using a tripod. So the live view function, you're absolutely going to notice it, and it's absolutely going to change the way you shoot. Now, I'm not at the point yet where if I'm shooting an event, I'm going to hold the camera in front of me. I'm still going to be here because I like to close out the outside world so they only exist within the view of my camera, and it helps me frame up my shots. But I'm sure there's an entire generation of photographers coming along now who are starting out shooting like this and will always shoot like that. I'm sure my daughters will never be look through the viewfinder kind of people. They'll come up training themselves to look at the back of the screen. So it's a big difference, and it's a great difference, and you're going to like it. But there is a downside that comes along with this, and we're talking about that next. When you're using the viewfinder on a mirrorless camera, you're not actually looking through the camera lens. What you're looking at is another screen. There's a screen on the back of the camera, and there's a screen inside the camera, and you are looking at that screen, so it's like you're watching a tiny TV. And this can be disconcerting when you make the switch because you're used to a DSLR and you're used to just seeing everything with your own eyes in real time, and now you're not seeing that anymore. Now it's exactly what you see on that screen, and you can tell it's a screen, and depending on what camera you buy, it may not be the best resolution screen. And so it's very, very weird after a generation of seeing real time, just looking through glass at your subject and pulling the trigger. It's very, very weird to now be watching a video of your subject before you pull the trigger. So one of the things that is worth looking into when we're talking about making the switch to mirrorless, and when you look at the reviews, they will talk about the viewfinder screen and the resolution of that screen, and it will make a difference. I don't know if it's a huge difference. To me, it's not. Like, I'll adapt to anything that I'm looking at, so I wouldn't like upgrade a camera because it has a better view screen, but because I'm just going to get used to it no matter what it is. But it is worth noticing. When you're looking for a mirrorless camera, is what's the resolution of that video screen that you're looking at when you look through the camera, because that's probably the weirdest thing about switching to mirrorless, is that you're no longer actually looking at people, you're just looking at a screen. Now, another thing you're going to have to get used to that has a big pro and a little bit of a con that goes with it is real-time exposure and depth of field preview. Because you are no longer looking through the glass and seeing what your glass sees, because you're now looking at a screen, you're looking at a picture. It's a video, but video is just a collection of pictures moving at high speed. You can see in real time what your exposure will be. So in the past, you were just looking through and your eye was adjusting, the iris of your eye would adjust so that you could see everything clearly. But you didn't know if the picture was going to be properly exposed or not. For that, you had to rely on the light meter. So you look at the light meter in your camera lens there, you're looking through and you see the light meter. The light meter's right in the middle, it's on 0. Good. I'm going to have a good exposed picture. I might want to overexpose, I might want to underexpose, but it wasn't until you took the picture that you could actually see a result. So you would chimp it, you would take the picture and you would look, you go, okay, yeah, that's good, right? And back in the days of film, there was no chimping at all. You just took the picture and you hoped you did everything right and it came out good. But you could chimp with a DSLR. Well, now you can see it in real time. This is huge because now when you're working with natural light, you can just look through, look the screen, and you can see what your picture's going to look like before you ever take it. And if you think it's too dark, you can make it lighter. And if you think it's too light, you can make it darker. And you never really have to look at the exposure meter, because the exposure meter is just telling you what the camera thinks is the proper exposure for the scene. But the camera can't really know what the proper exposure for the scene is in every situation. Because if it's a very dark scene, it actually needs to be underexposed for the blacks. And if it's a very bright scene, it needs to be overexposed for the whites. So the camera doesn't know this, right? So your eye is really the final test maker on this. The thing is going to finally tell you what's right. And now you can see it in real time. So you can just dial it. Oh, this is great. I love it. So I said there was a con, right? What's the con? Well, the con is once you start just using your eye to judge for whether or not the picture is exposed properly, you will stop to look at the meter. You will stop looking at the meter. There's no reason to look at the meter. You'll just move the dials until the picture looks the way you want it to look. Why do I need to look at the meter, right? That's great. Until you have to use a flash. Because when you're using a flash, you're looking at a scene that is supposed to be dark because the flash is going to brighten that scene up. So you're looking at the scene and it's too dark, and the flash is going to fix it. And so now you don't really get to see what it's going to look like until after you take it. And what happens is, if you're shooting in a dark area, the camera can't grab focus, or you can't see really well. So these cameras always have a setting on them that you can hit, and that setting will then boost the gain dramatically on the viewfinder screen. So everything comes up to where you can see it now. It may be grainy or whatever, but now you can see. So you're shooting in a dark room at a wedding or at a party, and it boosts everything. So now you can see everybody, and you can focus on them, and you can take the picture. However, what you are seeing is not what your picture is going to look like, because it's being boosted just for your eyes. It is not boosting it for the actual picture. The flash is going to change what your picture looks like. So that can be confusing, because you've been walking around with your camera all day or all week, simply seeing what you see and taking a picture and getting it. Now you are seeing something that is not what you are going to get in the final product. It's far from what you're going to get in the final product. And you have to push a button in order to get to that. So you push a button when you're using flash. Now, not a big deal if you're using flash all day. But if you're going back and forth, like if you're outside and then you're inside, you're at a party, right? You go outside, your kids are playing in the bouncy house. You go inside, you want to use the flash. Every time you do that, now you have to hit the button to make sure that you bring up the thing so now you can see everybody clearly to use the flash. And then when you walk outside, you want to hit the button and turn it off. And, maybe not a big deal, but when you're hitting buttons all the time on your camera, one more button that you now have to hit, one more thing you have to remember to hit, and you have to remember that when you hit it, things are going to change inside your camera, and you have to be adapted to that when you've never really had to do that before. Yeah, that's something I didn't really think about when I made the switch to mirrorless, was that there's going to be this process going on now in my brain when I'm switching between flash and non-flash that I never had before. Because in the old days, it didn't matter if the flash was on there or not. You were just looking at what you were looking at, period. You didn't see a real-time exposure. So you gain the real-time exposure and you gain the real-time depth of field preview, but you have to pay a little bit of a price for it. By now, you're going to have another button to push, and you're going to have another process going on in your brain. And I personally like to have as few things going on in my brain as I possibly can when I'm shooting, so I can just concentrate on shooting and framing and composition and looking for the shot. Now, the other thing I just touched on, I didn't really go into, is real-time depth of field. This is huge. If you are shooting with a really shallow depth of field, especially if you're doing something like detail shots at a wedding or something where you really want a shallow depth of field, to be able to see in real time how blurry the background is going to be in that picture, wow, right? That's huge. We've never had that before, and that's really, really, really cool. And it means less chimping. It means more getting the picture right the first time that you shoot it. So, overall, there's no doubt that the pros outweigh the cons. Just know this is an extra thing that you're going to have to think about when you're shooting, is that sometimes I'm seeing my picture and sometimes I'm not seeing my picture. The other area where there's a big pro and also a little bit of a con is the eye focus. Now, if you haven't dealt with having auto eye focus on a camera before, this is going to rock your world when you switch to mirrorless, because now suddenly, instead of having to constantly move your focus point around to get it where you want it to be, suddenly the camera just sees the face, focuses on the eye, and you shoot. When you are doing stuff on a tripod, when I'm doing professional headshots, say I'm going down and doing a bunch of lawyers' headshots in their office, this is huge. You just set the camera up, you compose everything nice, and then you can just pull the trigger while you just talk to people and get them to smile, and the camera's going to focus on that eye dead sharp every single time, and it is wonderful. Now, event work is a little bit different, because in event work, you're often taking pictures of people who aren't looking at the camera. You're doing photojournalistic work. So in that case, sometimes the heads are turned and the eyes can't be found, or the camera's not sure which head you want them to focus on. So in my first couple of events using the eye tracking, I was like, oh, okay, it's not focusing on the person I want, it's focusing on the person over there, and blah, blah. And so then I would instantly take control and put the focus point where I wanted it to be. But if you still have the eye tracking turned on, sometimes it will fight you. It really depends on what camera you're using, but sometimes it will fight you. Like, you'll place it where you want it to be, and it'll try and place it someplace else, and it can just really be a nightmare scenario. And so what you have to do is turn off the eye tracking, autofocus. Guess what? That's another button. Now we've got the one. Now you're moving in outside, outside, and you're having to hit the button for your flash to turn off the pumping of your inside screen so that everything looks brighter. You're turning that off or turning that on. And now when you're not getting the eye tracking you want, there's another button that you've got to have it programmed to be able to instantly turn off so you can take control of the focus point yourself. So again, these are just two little cons, new added things that you're going to have to do and deal with. And if you're somebody who's been shooting with a DSLR for years, it's weird to have something new put into your routine. Before we do the last thing on my list, I do want to take just a minute to tell you about a new video that I have out that you are going to love. If you like to shoot on location and you like to shoot with lighting on location, or you'd like to learn how to shoot on location lighting, then this video is for you. It's called One Light on Location, and it's my video tutorial on how to work on location taking portraits with just one light. Your camera and one light, one flash on a stand. This is something I've been doing for years, and all the weddings that I shot on the beach, all the weddings I've shot, the bar mitzvahs, the events, the portraits, the senior portraits, I almost always work with just one light, and I have a system for doing it very quickly and very efficiently and getting amazing, amazing results. So check it out. The link is right down there in the description, and if you use the code YouTube, you'll get 20% off. So use the code YouTube to get 20% off on my video, One Light on Location. All right, this brings us to the last thing that is going to be a little bit weird to get used to when you switch to mirrorless. The first time this happened to me, I thought maybe something was wrong with my battery. I was shooting an event. It was a graduation, right? It was a big graduation for preschoolers. So all the kids are coming out on stage in groups, and they're all singing and dancing, which, by the way, if you've never had a preschool graduation, it's about the happiest thing in the world you can do. And so I'm shooting natural light because they have good lights on the stage. And so I'm shooting a lot because the kids come out and just got to take a couple of shots of the whole group. Then you got to do 2 shots of each kid going all the way down the line. Then you got to come back because now their hands are in the air. So you do a lot. You really shoot a lot of frames. And before the hour was up, I changed my battery. Now, coming from a DSLR, I shoot entire 7-hour weddings and never change my battery. And now I'm at an event for an hour and I'm changing my battery because these mirrorless cameras, because of the screen on the back that's always on and the screen inside the camera that's always on, they just chew down your battery life so quickly. So there's a couple of things you can do about that. Number one, you can learn to turn your camera off a lot. And this is new for me. I used to never turn my camera off. I had it set so it would turn itself off after like 5 minutes, but otherwise I never turned it off. And I mean, I wouldn't even turn it off before I put it in the case. I just put it in the case and let it turn itself off automatically. But with a mirrorless camera, I'm trying to teach myself that anytime the camera drops to my side for just more than a second, I turn it off to preserve that battery life, to turn off that screen. So that's one thing, and again, a new thing that you're going to have to put into your shooting routine, and you're going to have to make, muscle memory where you just do it all the time. And the other thing is remembering to check your battery all the time. In my old camera, I never, hardly ever looked at my battery. If I was shooting a wedding, going into the reception, I might look to see how my battery was doing. But other than that, I never really paid attention to the battery icon. I put in a fresh battery before I went on the gig, and I knew I was good. It was never a problem. But now, I'm always looking at the battery icon. I'm always looking. So anytime you're like, okay, well, I'm shooting in this room, and now I'm going to that room to shoot for a little bit, on the way, look at the battery. See if you can change it. And to be fair, when I changed the battery out in the gig I was just doing, it wasn't red yet, but it was low enough in the thing that I was like, okay, I'm nervous. I don't want something big to happen on stage, and that's when my battery decides to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and change it. So as before, I used to carry maybe, 3 batteries with me. Now I carry like 8. And I'm probably going to take a charge or 2. If it's a long day, I'm going to take a charge or 2 just so I can charge stuff on location just in case. So that's probably the single biggest wow thing about switching to mirrorless that's negative, is just getting used to having these batteries in your camera that don't last long at all. All right, that's it. I hope that if you're thinking about making the switch to mirrorless, that I've given you some stuff to think about and some things to anticipate and maybe prepare for. If I've forgotten something, and it's almost definite that I've forgotten something, please put it in the comments below. Leave your comments, give me a like, and subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching.